Don't forget to turn your computer out. Perfect, right?
Perfect. We're here. Yes. So I'm so excited today. And I just want to give a little bit of an introduction to our guest. And it's in the way of honoring the fact that today is Veterans Day. And it is 11 o'clock on the 11th of November. And that was when the armistice was signed back in 1918 after World War I. So my family and I visited Melbourne, Australia together in 2007. And I'll never forget our tour of the Shrine of Remembrance. It's a memorial to any Australian who has served in wars. So at the center of that sanctuary is a stone of remembrance. It's a marble stone that's sunk below the pavement. So the visitors bow their heads to read the inscription. And the inscription says, "Greater love hath no man." It's part of a verse from the Bible, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." And the stone is aligned with this little opening in the roof of the sanctuary so that a ray of sunlight falls on that word love on the stone of remembrance at exactly 11 a.m. on November 11th, the time that peace was declared in 1918. So with love as our theme and remembering the progress that we've made in the last, since 1918, to fully integrate and appreciate all of our loved ones. I'd like to introduce the author of Hard Landings and several novels telling the stories of people with disabilities with love. I've read one so far. I can't wait to read the others. Cammie McGovern.
Oh, thank you. What a beautiful introduction, because it reminds us of the bigger picture and all of the communities that we are all part of, and that are too often forgotten and marginalized and have been historically, and it continues to be a challenge. So I love that. I love that image of the sun. God, how did they manage that? Pointing on the one word that matters. Yeah. Just lovely.
Yes. Yeah, it really stuck with me. So I'm going to kick it off. We have some participants online with us here, so folks, don't hesitate to put any questions or messages right in, in the chat there, and we'll be able to see you. The question that I have is, was inspired by a recent podcast by Krista Tippett at the On Being podcast, and she's a member of NPR, and she's a phenomenal interviewer. And she interviewed Brian Stevenson. He's written a book called Just Mercy, and in that book the quote is, "Love is the motive, but justice is the instrument." So Cammie, after all the research that you've done, how can we all help bring justice for our kids? I mean, they really deserve to be just a part of everything that we do.
I think it's a great place to start, because one of my feelings when I was, just to give people a little background if they don't know anything, is that I'm the parent of 3 children, and our oldest is the one with autism and IDD, so intellectual and developmental disability. And when he was our first child, so we were learning everything as we went along, and he was late being diagnosed because I don't think we recognized a lot of what should have been that wasn't there. And I was a great example of someone who stayed in denial for too long about being honest about where he was at, because I thought labels hurt people and would limit what teachers thought he could do. And what I admire when I'm seeing parents of younger kids is when they're so active right from the beginning and not feeling this kind of shame or judgment or scared of those things, because what you quickly learn is forget all that, forget shame and judgment, and get the help you need and join the communities you need and find others in similar paths. But to this question about justice, one of the things I felt while Ethan was going through school is that I didn't want him, I didn't want to be one of those parents, probably I probably overemphasized this, that was asking for too much or was demanding, that became unlikable by the teachers because I was pushy, and insisting my child could do more than he could. At the same time, that's a parent's job. And one of the things, a parent's job is to insist that your child can, to insist that we keep attempting to move the child forward on what you're seeing as potential. And I felt like one of the interesting things when I started researching this is how deeply forgotten this community was, and how badly treated they were for so long and so recently. And that is that the history here, it does become a question of justice when it was only in 1990 that the federal law guaranteed an inclusive education in the same schools where their siblings with all other kids. And Ethan was born in 1996. So that was, this really is the first generation to be properly educated that's coming of age right now. Before that, it was 1971 or 73, now I'm forgetting, that they were mandated that they had to be educated in some way. And that very frequently meant in church basements, anywhere they could go, and very separated and isolated, and the schools could define what that meant. And clearly it didn't work. And parents, so we're at the cusp of something new, and it helped me to realize this is a civil rights issue. This is, and it's not just Ethan, because part of me didn't want to be the parent that was insisting my child be given more or better. They all need to get more or better, and our world will improve when they are all included more successfully and productively and effectively, and all of that. So I began to see how this is a justice issue and a civil rights issue, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, my daughter was born in 96 as well. So,
Oh,
yeah, my
that's
youngest.
your youngest, yeah.
Yeah. So, but even back then, they didn't especially recognize girls with autism.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I took her finally to be evaluated as a teenager, and I filled out all the paperwork, checked all the boxes, and the guy said she still didn't qualify. And it was like,
yeah.
Because of,
I think that's actually the new cutting edges, that we're going to understand how autism presents so differently in young women and in girls. And they're statistically 10 years later to get diagnosed. And because of the compensating, for any number of reasons, but being able to compensate better than boys, or understanding they can mimic and mask. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really fascinating. And oh boy, does that need to be addressed, because it becomes what's happening is they're getting diagnosed later with all these mental health issues.
Yes.
That are because of the stress and pain and difficulty of masking, or trying to not understand their own inability to understand social interactions.
Yes.
When was your daughter diagnosed?
It was, so if she was 96, 13, so that'd be, well, I diagnosed her, but she never officially got a diagnosis until after she graduated from high school.
That's more and more common.
But, we got all the accommodations in fact, it was in second grade, maybe even first or second grade, when the school psychologist handed me Ross Greene's book about the explosive child and said, I think this would be helpful to you. We knew that she was different, but we didn't have that label of autism. And I wish now that we had, because then I would have been afforded more resources. But you know how it is, you learn as you go. And especially with the ones that are young adults now, we need to didactically teach them what they need to know. It's not that they just pick this stuff up. It just doesn't happen that way. That's just not the kind of brain they got. And, in some cases, that's good news because they have some really good assets in their brain. In other ways, it certainly helps, it makes them suffer.
Mm-hmm.
So let me see if I can add this. The next question that we have from one of the people that submitted it ahead of time was, how do we help our young adults navigate workplace relationships? How has that worked with you and Ethan?
Great question. And one of the things I talk about in the book a lot is the question of community-based employment versus congregate setting employment. And that is a much bigger issue than I realized before I started, which was that the emphasis in every way, funding, federal, all the goals are on getting all of these folks with autism spectrum and IDD into community-based jobs. So that's where the big push is now. Mm-hmm. And what our experience with Ethan was that it's a great idea. Ethan is actually very social, very cheerful, happy-go-lucky, and I hesitate on that whole where he is on the functioning spectrum, but he's got ID, and so he's would have been in the slot that we were trying to put him into, grocery stores, trying cafeteria work, dishwashing rooms, all of those kinds of things. And my big revelation was that Ethan was stressed out in community-based jobs, surrounded by other folks, that typically developing folks with none of his own peers around him with disabilities. And I think it would work for a while, and then he would have so much trouble. It would be like he'd say he loved his job at the dish room at UMass at Amherst College near us, except that he couldn't stop stimming, or they would say, or this actually happened in a very, very specifically and dramatically in a nursing home where he really wanted to work. He really likes older people. And they said he can't come back. He's disturbing to the residents if he can't stop the self-talk. And the next day he went and they did their little assessment, and it was 80% of the time he spent in self-talk. And to me, it said, like he would have said, I'm going to not do that. I'm not going to run movie lines. I'm not going to. We had a number of different paths towards, I would say, failing at all these different jobs in the workforce. Because some of them he seemed to be doing very well, and then he would quit and say, I'm allowed to quit. I'm an adult now. And what we finally realized was when we sort of broke down and just got him a place in desperation, because when we got him a place in a congregate setting of farms that called Prospect Meadow Farm in Western Mass that specializes in employing people with developmental disability, he instantly was on track, more successful than he had been. And it seemed to be that without much discussion of it, he could relax and be more himself and more productive as a result, because there were part of it was having aides always around him, and he was ready to shake off the support staff that were telling him quiet voice or quiet hands or all of those things that those kids have been told most of their lives. But okay, so the question was, how do we support them to be more successful with in a workplace? Was that the original question?
Workplace, yeah.
It's worth parents considering both. Certainly every parent should try the community-based setting. That is what the everybody wants. So in the transition years from 16 to 21, all people with IDD or any kind of autistic spectrum disorder should be trying as many different job placements as they can. And parents should not do what I do. I'm quick to say all the mistakes I made. Parents should not do the thing where you say, oh, that won't work. That he'll not be successful at that. He's not grown up enough. He's not careful enough in stocking. He won't be able to do that, because these are the years your growing adult will continue to surprise you all the time.
Mhm.
So some of them will be remarkably and shockingly successful. For some of them, and for us and the friends, Ethan's friends that I know, it worked. I don't know too many for whom they've had a terrific community-based job that they've just stayed in, that they got into in high school, they did internship, and then it translated. But that's because they're a little bit more on Ethan's level. It's happening all the time with people who don't have IDD or don't have intellectual disability. And I guess there was another question I think that you sent me that said, how about navigating workplace relationships?
Yes.
My sense is, so maybe I'm jumping ahead a little, how about navigating talking about your disability? My sense and my inclination is that being honest ahead of time is always the best, if it's possible, and if your child is able to, the more they can talk about their disability, the stronger they are, the less it weakens them by trying to not be found out. And what they are doing in the bigger picture, in the bigger scheme of things, is showing the world, this is autism. This is what autism looks like. And yes, I am really high functioning, and I am, but here's my specific areas when it gets too loud, too busy, or I can spend too long on a certain task.
Mhm.
We're having so much more of that now, where, you know, actors and people are just coming out and saying, yes, I'm autistic too. And you feel like saying, oh my God, no, you're not. And what you don't say that, you know, like, except when someone comes out and says I'm autistic, and understand this is a wide umbrella, and you are doing a favor by educating the world on this is
Yes.
what it looks like. And then
Yeah.
you're also showing them this is these are also the pluses that you get in when you hire autism. And there are so many concrete advantages to hiring autistic employees, and ones that have been
Mhm.
honest about it.
Mhm. Yes, and as long as our young adults can identify what they need, and that's the part, we just need to get it in a nice little package so they can say, look, when it's too busy, I need, some
Yeah.
space. When there's a conflict, I need a third party to help me.
Mm-hmm.
Because we did run into some pretty tricky situations in one of our children's employments where there was some bullying going on,
Yeah.
and there was actually some sexual harassment happening as well.
Oh,
And those are tricky situations, and mom can't run in and intervene.
no,
So
not not
unless maybe
usually.
I
That's not the
could.
first line of defense. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the idea, is that you want them to solve the problem so then they have the confidence they can do it again later. But wow, even, people that are non-autistic have a hard time navigating those things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
this
that's
is
a good
not,
reminder.
yeah, this is not easy. So I agree. I'm with you all the way on the let's try as many things and see which one works best for our child.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the fact that Ethan's found a place where he doesn't have to try to be anything other than 100% Ethan.
Yes. And I will say, just before we get off that topic, the other really surprising thing I learned in researching the book is how controversial congregate settings are. And there's a really good reason for that. And it's partly the history, that the history was that congregate settings were equated with terrible abuse, terrible abuse. And so the great fear, and I do believe, I think it's because most of the people at the top of disability policy now started their careers back in the days when they were the rebels and the activists fighting to close those institutions and abusive sheltered workshop situations that were underpaying, exploiting workers. And now they're at the top of the decision-making chain, and they cannot see anything except that congregating these people together will be going backwards and will create the same problems that we worked so hard 25, 30 years ago to get rid of, to escape from, and we cannot go back. And my sense is actually it's a whole different world, and that's because of the education, because of inclusive education, and parents are so mystified, including me, about why sheltered workshops are closing all around the country. Larger group homes, group settings are really limited. And the things that seem to intentional communities, and my state is especially strict about this, intentional communities for residential, all those kinds of things, not allowed, just period, not allowed. And the largest congregate setting. In fact, the farm where Ethan's at has an exception to their rule. They closed all the sheltered workshops, and there was an effort in Boston to shut down the farm as well. But it's so popular, so well loved, they've kind of slipped through the closing all sheltered workshops. So my sense is I'm hoping that parents, in understanding what they need to fight for, is one thing is fighting for let's support and legitimize intentional communities of different kinds, that we're not and we can trust that there will be oversight and they will not all slip into abusive or rolling back situations. I think there's just too many of our kids that really do find a home in that.
Yeah, it's got to be a patchwork quilt of solutions.
Yeah.
We can't say, you know, the only solutions are 4 people or less in a home. It's just not going to, you know, or the only places if they go to a, you know, not sheltered workshop type environment, because that just seems like it's all or nothing thinking. And frankly, we try to help our kids not do that. So
yes.
And here we are doing it.
Great irony, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
That
it is all or nothing thinking.
Yeah.
I think New York is slightly different. Every state is very different. Yes. And so it's good to know. Hopefully in the book, it was helpful for me to see just how different states approach this, to understand what Massachusetts has told us, that this is always abusive and we must get rid of all congregate settings, is not the philosophy down in you know, even next door in Connecticut, or certainly not down south in Florida. That there's a wide variety, and that it is possible to go and show legislators or to start to push for some of these changes. Like, here's an example of something that's been very successful and has worked for a long time. And I do think the hard side of being at the beginning of what adult services, how they're reshaping and getting remade and recreated constantly in every state, and the laws around them and where money is going, is that what's hard is that we don't have a lot of blueprints in place. But what's wonderful is that clearly the blueprints that are moving forward are driven by parents, often very proactive parent groups that have just come together to create something. And often it's a supported workplace, or they've started a cafe, a coffee shop, a bakery, a diner for their child to work. They brought in others, and then you know, other employees with disabilities, and they built a community. And then when the state sees how well it's worked, they come in and offer support. I saw many examples of that were really heartening. They're just seeing success in action and saying, okay, this is how we want to do it.
So the parents really got it started.
Oh gosh, yes. It's all kind of
grassroots. Yeah.
Roots. Yeah.
And that's obvious. That's such a great way to do it, because it's driven so much by love, you know. It's just totally driven by love, with of course some practicalities around the profit part to be sustainable. But I'm really, I was heartened to read about all the different kinds of options that are available. Do you know, is there an aggregate database that says, here's what's in Iowa, here's what's in Indiana, here's what's in Ohio? Is there any place?
There's a wonderful one for housing, for residential options. And that is called the Autism Housing Network. And it's Madison. I will send you a link, and I think it's in the book as well, because I've interviewed quite a bit in the book the head of that, and her name is Desiree Kamika. And nobody is more knowledgeable about how these residential communities are, and the laws around them from state to state, and which states are opening them up, where intentional communities are allowed, where but that she doesn't deal with employment situations. So she's trying to expand and widen the options for residential and housing. And she's doing a wonderful job, and that group is really wonderful. And she's got a map that on that website that you can just click over, and there's 6 different kind of options, and you can just go to people's websites and see what there are. But she was the one that said these are all parent sponsored, and some of them are parent started, instigated, because the states are hesitant to take the kind of risk, and they don't know what's going to pay off. And she also has a good feel for what government will ultimately support, because you're looking for, as long as we're getting on this, when you're dreaming of residential options, there's a wide range, because you're mostly looking for inclusive community housing, where there would be a quarter of the apartments offered or something are offered to people with disabilities, low income housing. But it would be, and then you've got a new trend is this concierge, or somebody that's at an apartment building that would, it's called an inclusion concierge. And they would be facilitating inclusive activities between all the residents. So it'd be student housing plus disabled housing with, 1/4, and then activities here and there that bring everybody together, which I think is what's needed, because otherwise everybody's living alone in their own apartments.
Yes. On their devices.
Yeah, on their devices, and quite isolated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that building of that community, just a fun place for people to gather. And
yes,
have
game watching, just stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And then we got to figure out how to keep the employment option too. We have to figure out how to get our people in a good employment. And like you said,
yes,
a lot of those are also started by the parents, where they're just entrepreneurial and they put it together and they bring as many people as they can to support it and make it happen. Yeah, such a good question. Okay, so I guess another question we have here is, how can I help make a difference in general when it comes to people's perceptions of autism or developmental disability?
Well, this sort of gets to what we've already been saying, but it's being unafraid of talking about your disability. And it's interesting. Ethan was part of a group of a lot of social skills groups with a after school center that was doing a lot of relationship training. And they made this point of, the first exercise in all of those groups was talking about what your disability is. And I remember questioning that at first, thinking, God, we're over focusing on diagnoses or something like that. And then I realized, no, the ability to say with pride what you have, or just lack of any shame, that is a practiced art. And it demystifies it, or it destigmatizes it for everybody else. So it's talking to your kids about, with great candor. So it starts with your kids, I would say. How do we expand and get them able to answer the question of why are you different, or and in a thoughtful way with other people, talking about it yourself, and not being, and I was not very good at that in the beginning, celebrating the achievements. I mean, I think we're at a point of neurodiversity pride that we're understanding that much more, and we're probably only at the beginning of that, of understanding, and more adults figuring out, I might be autistic too, or on the spectrum, and with great comfort. And parents, I mean, there's so many parents, I wish we had statistics on it, who can diagnose themselves after their child has.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think talking about that openly and honestly is also part of it, because every single time you do, the person on the other side doesn't judge you, they judge the label, they judge their own assumptions about autism, like, oh, I didn't know you could be good at all this, successful in your career, have a, be married and have all this and be autistic. I think that's what we need to always be working on. You can have all those things and also be autistic.
That is a really good point. And I don't know that I've done that as much as I want to now that you mention it with my kids and with my clients, with the young adults that I work with, is to be able to describe, how your autism affects you and how, and what that means in terms of what needs you're going to do.
Yeah.
I know that my daughter worked for a number of years, 5 almost, as an after school counselor, and they had her go around to the various places and talk about being autistic.
Oh, I think that's brilliant.
Which was
That's
brilliant. She was so proud of herself when she
Yeah,
came
that's
home.
wonderful.
And thank goodness she had her leader was just, they're friends to this day. And they got laid off because of COVID, so because they shut, they shut all that down. And now we're going through the re-entry into job market process, and it's rough. It's rough.
Yeah.
Here we go again. So,
out of curiosity, did she really want to work with kids? Did she love that? No.
she did fall in love with the kids after a while.
Yeah, but that's not her primary goal.
But
I will think the more this is done at a younger age, so if parents of younger kids,
yes,
I think it normalizing it early on, and what I've
yes,
learned is going around, because I do kids books for younger elementary age, young adult books for teenagers. All of them are very curious, very open, very interested, and in any subset of any classroom, there will be the helper kids who, for them, this
yes.
is the best part of their experiences, when a teacher calls on them, can you be so and so's helper, or can you go out to recess, show them this game, and they just rise to it in such a way that I keep thinking this, and kind of demonstrate, it all comes naturally. It's just, they're just good at it. Maybe they're a sibling, maybe they just have that facility, but talking about it and normalizing it that's inclusion, but you have to talk about it first. I thought inclusion was supposed to happen magically without ever discussing it.
I know.
To just magically
accept
Ethan. I didn't want the big classroom conversation about his differences. Oh, how wrong I was. Just another thing, how wrong I was. It happens when you do discuss it.
Yeah, can we just skip over the uncomfortable parts?
Yeah. Of calling him something so the other kids hear that. The other kids don't have any association, or they all have heard autism 100 times and that they don't quite know.
No, you don't. Yeah, I thought you did such a good job with that in Just My Luck in your book. With the young, and now I'm not sure what his name, I don't remember names of characters very well, but
That's okay.
Was the older kid, the younger kid was the one that was really, a lot of the point of view was from his point of view, where he was trying to explain, how he was different. He had to go to the math tutor in school, and then he met a friend that was also, she had trouble with her vision. And then there was the cool Lisa over there, and George was his brother,
in this book,
who was on the spectrum. And then his teacher ended up having a son who, I just thought you did such a wonderful job of noticing how the discomfort and describing from the point of view, like how uncomfortable all that is. And yet when they worked through it, wow. What? And then the dad got sick. He had an aneurysm or some,
Yes, right. We're all struggling with something. It does sound like a book full of disaster and disability, but hopefully it's kind of what you look around and see. There's also something funny in my school visits where I talk quite a bit about how many of you know somebody with autism, and every hand goes up, and how many of you are a sibling, and what autism is, and your brain works differently. I have a whole little thing, and inevitably the first kid question, or the first kid, like, so any questions or comments, and inevitably within the first three, somebody says, I've got asthma. And you realize that starts with A. I
Yeah.
used to like sort of try and say something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's sort of saying that every kid has something that is a weird, scary word attached to them, and not knowing what to make of it. And that asthma can be just as scary to a kid, or just as mystifying as autism. And we parents have put all these things where it's like, oh, asthma, who cares? We're the ones. I don't know. I just thought this is how they connect with it, and it's good to get it all out there and discuss it as much as possible.
Oh, so smart to do that. So smart to do that. And we parents, I think, need to remember that most people we know also know people who are on the autism spectrum, or have some other difference in, ADHD, or, all the different things that can happen with the brain. I mean, we have 7.8 billion of us on the planet. To think that everybody's going to cluster toward the middle is a little
Yeah,
ridiculous, now that we understand how, that the genetic lottery works, right? So there's
yeah,
going to be people on either end, the
yeah,
savants that we hear about, and wish we could wave a magic wand and have that happen. And then
yeah,
the reality, here we are, with the people that really, with most of the people that I love, hate math. So, they're on that other, they're very
yeah,
verbal. They want to design games. They want to create movies. They want to do that sort of, they're very on the other side of the brain. So
yes,
you
yes,
don't see that talked about as often. You do hear a lot about the savant type, which is such a tiny drop in the bucket. So I do believe that by knowing so many people, that's how we can get some of the legislative changes that we need. If we recognize that, first, as you say in the book, that people with disabilities are the largest minority group in the country, and then if we add to that all the people who know those people, and the fact that we can
yeah.
become one of those
It's quite a
people,
force. It's
yeah,
quite a force.
we
Yeah,
have quite a fort if we can unite underneath that.
yeah,
I think that's, but I think you're right. The very first step is to have the people who are different explain why they're different, and how, what they need as a result, is just the
yeah.
best way to get it out there. Just the best way. So let me just grab another. I can't wait to grab another one of your books and read it. I can't read it. Oh, and I did, by the way, also find an interview of you in 2017 where
Oh,
you recommended another author, Jennifer Niven, All the Bright Places. You said it was
oh,
one of
that's mental
your favorite
health.
books.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Did you read that book?
I couldn't put the darn thing down.
I'm sorry for disappearing for a moment.
It's
Somebody's just asking for the book, and I realized, oh, everybody always does that, so you can see the book. Go
Yeah.
ahead, keep saying about all the bright places.
All the Right Places, Jennifer Niven. If we roll into people who have differently wired brains, if we roll into that, anybody that's, that has a differently wired process of dealing with mental health issues as well, then, we can really be a force to be reckoned with, because it will get it out of the shadows and into the light, and we can see all the benefits as well as the challenges. Yeah. Yeah. So this is great.
Oh my gosh, you can't even get me started on how unfair it is, because our group is actually adequately funded, or is, I mean, this is the great secret, is that federal government spends, I don't know the statistics, but it's something like 3 to 4 times as much as they do on people with mental health issues. And that needs to get addressed. It's figuring out for the disabled population, where should that enormous pile of federal money go? What should be the priorities? What should be the targeting? What should it not put money into? What should it? But the finding full and adequate lives for people with mental health issues is got has just a fraction of the attention and the money. It's terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Talk about justice.
Yeah. Talk about
And
justice.
and because many of our people who have autism also have comorbid mental health conditions.
Yeah,
That's why that needs to be addressed. Comorbid, what a word, but I don't,
I
it's the right
know.
word, but I don't like it, have it at the same
Two
time.
things to die from, and it's not. Why is it? It just, yeah, the word is wrong.
The word is wrong, but it's what's used, so I use it. But yeah, I think there's so much to be learned about both, because often some of the approaches that we use to help are, didactic teaching and thought management. And it's the same, a lot of the approaches are for that population as well, that help, that seem
Yeah.
to help. Yeah. So I wanted to raise to, and I just put both of those names of those two books up
Here, I'm
there.
going to do this. This is the book we're talking about because somebody just put that up on the, and then I'm going to move it. You can see other writers have figured out how to have this behind them subtly, and I can't
Clever,
figure out how to
clever
do
of
that
them.
subtly while we're on. You'd hardly notice the,
Yeah,
um, subliminal advertisement.
yeah,
I
yeah.
will figure out how to do that next time.
Okay. Well, my daughter had one of my daughters has had a question too, and it's about how do I in fact let me make sure I read it literally so that I don't paraphrase when I don't have any right to do that. Okay. So when you're caught up in an emotional hijack, is what she calls it, what is
Oh,
the best
interesting.
way to talk yourself out of it?
Oh, what a profound question.
Mm.
I wonder if emotional hijack, is she talking about heightened like romantic situations, do you think, or just work situations?
Mostly in her case, it can be from everywhere, but it just means like her brain is fritzed.
Yeah.
It's not working. She's just
I
like some
feel
thought.
like, yeah, I wish, because that's going to be so different for every person. And that is where adult coaching can come in, because I often think parents are not the most helpful for this. I feel like support groups and fellow peers with the same struggle are going to be the most helpful. And, I'm surprised by what good writers sometimes, young people, and processing stuff on paper is
Mm.
one technique, or online, or and working through, but if she's talking about sort of a meltdown, like that's an
Yeah.
adult version of how to avoid a meltdown. And I think that's everybody, it could be going back and thinking about the childhood, how, how we got through the meltdowns of childhood, because it seems like that was kind of what was making everybody get their diagnosis in the first place, is
Oh, yeah.
why was everybody an explosive child.
Yeah.
And then we got better, everything got better, and now it's more sophisticated and sometimes more heartbreaking, of figuring out how miscues, mistakes, can spiral quickly out of, um, and get larger than they should, or need to, or the person would want them. And so it's the great adult challenge, is how to
Mhm.
get out of those spirals. I will say, because one of the questions, unless you want to just go, one of the questions was about navigating romantic relationships.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I I feel like, another surprise that I learned is how much farther behind we are. Not the It does vary a great deal how much education there is on, well, sex education there is from state to state, varies a great deal in America. But as a country as a whole, we do dramatically less relationship education than other countries. So England and
Mm.
Australia, for instance.
Mhm.
And in England, it was just mandated in 2019 that every child starting in kindergarten have, it's called relationship building education. I can't remember what it's the but they start with anti-bullying, which we have a little bit of here in some states, and it's 3 hours a week of, a curriculum that's set up. But what they're doing is, is also introducing the groundwork for later on, more more complicated idea. So the idea in England is that in elementary school, the possibility of alternative families, single parents, homosexual parents, all is just introduced as those are families too. And then we get into, when they're in high school, you get into different sexuality, gender identity, and online safety, appropriate, what the meaning of consent is, and what consensual, what healthy relationships are, all these complicated topics. So maybe I'm taking too long to get to the fact that Love on the Spectrum is one of the best shows, I think, about all of this. Isn't it interesting that it takes place in Australia, where they're all doing these classes and these groups and these talk arounds about how to get relationships? We don't have nearly enough of that here, not nearly. Right. And it's because it starts with the schools not being mandated. So basically, there's only one state in the country that mandates teaching sex education for kids with IDD. Only one state, Oregon. There's 3 states, that encourage it, but encouraging it does not happen unless parents go in. And then there's 38 states that don't allow anything except abstinence only. I was surprised by where we're at. The point being, if you are in a state that allows the possibility of discussion of relationships, and the sex education is such a small part of it, that's 1 day class. That's 1 day to talk about the nuts and bolts of sex, and your child can opt out of it if that gives you the heebie-jeebies. But I would say they are 7 times more likely to be the victims of abuse. Don't opt out. I would say education is the first defense that will help them know what is okay and what's not okay. But the far more important is all the building up on healthy relationships, on what does a friendship look like? What's a good friendship? What's a frenemy? What's somebody who's making me feel bad about myself? What is unintentional hurtful behavior, which is they can often be guilty of themselves because they're, no filters and all of that, and are can make terrible mistakes. And I just wish we had more of those support groups and talking groups. And it's such a new idea here. Oh, I guess what I was starting to say is parents can push, if you've got a transition age child, I did not realize you have to really ask for it and advocate. No, very few schools will say we are offering this for fear of the blowback from parents, or we're still at the beginning of all this. They don't want to stir the pot if no parents are asking for it. I assumed, we live in Amherst, which is a very progressive town. I assumed Ethan was getting sex education. He did not get it until he was 19. Are parents doing that? I wasn't. I didn't. I was assuming the school was. Yeah. Anyway, I think that would be another thing I would do differently.
Is start out with that.
And then just get more talking groups going. And that must be part of your work as an adult coach, is they want to talk to somebody else beside their parents. I would think many, and it would be great to talk to your parents, but they're also each other, their peers, peer mentors, seeing examples of good relationships around them, of good. I think there's this phenomenon now where so many kids with IDD or developmental disorder or autistic dream about having relationships and fantasize. And the only examples they see are on movies and TV. And so that's where all the obsession with getting a typically developing or a neurotypical girlfriend, that's the only kind they've seen. Right. And if you can see more examples that are not necessarily people that might be more appropriate, that might be you share in common your struggles with certain things. Those are the loveliest relationships, that we can all navigate together and with each other. And anyway, that would be my
Yeah,
hope
I think
for the
the
future.
trouble that I often it's all put under the umbrella of social skills.
I
And
know.
and when I think of social skills, I think of making small talk at a wedding. This is not what our people need.
No,
What the people I love need partnering skills. Barb Alvila
that's
wrote
it.
Seeing Autism. She coined that term for me, and I thought that is so much better. And so that's part of the Art of Adulting, the course and the coaching and the community that I do. We definitely work on the people skills. And the one we start with first is listening.
Yeah.
That's the one we start with, listening. And
My
then
son is terrible at that.
I know it's so easy. Well, none of
Right.
us are
Or
particularly good
staying
at it.
around, ask a question and then stay around and listen to the answer
Yeah.
and see if you can, yeah. Because
And
he's
then the
like, he's
next
so pleased
skill.
with his question, he bounces away. And
So
it's very
cute.
funny, but I think that's a great place to start. Yeah.
Yeah, we start there, and then it's like not just listening, but then reflecting back what you heard in a succinct way. That's not so easy to do. And that way the other person feels seen
Heard.
and soothed and safe with you to share what the next thing is that they want to talk about. So
Yeah.
that's the cornerstone skill that we teach in my program. And it takes time to experiment with that and figure out what works for you and to get it to stick. And then, over time you can master that skill. And if you
Yeah.
do, that one is, that can be the
Huge.
cornerstone you can
Yeah.
really build on. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
also like the word partnering because
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of different ways that of building real, like when you've talked about love and trying to help our kids find love, I think for me, I think of it as community of being surrounded by people who understand, appreciate, and enjoy him.
Yes.
And and they are out there for all of our kids. They are out there, but how can you find safe, happy occasions for them to share in that community? And I do think partnering, I've seen more examples of lovely sort of housing or roommate situation where it's not necessarily a romantic relationship, but it
Yes.
is a
Exactly.
genuine friendship in which they have taught each other, and they're one is better at certain things and the other is better at other things, and together, and they build a family, they build a life together, and that
Yes.
is what's to shoot for.
That's what's to shoot for, because that'll help them in the work environment as well
Yeah.
as in their personal and home life. And then in
Yeah.
their own private, actually, I take it three ways, because if you learn to listen to yourself and notice the thoughts that work for you and the ones that don't work for you, that's how we can get more to that question that my daughter had about how do I deal with my meltdown. And
Yeah.
then, between really hearing what you're saying, hearing what your body's saying, hearing what your mind is saying, and then trying to figure out what really works is the self-talk piece of the course that I teach. It's about that as well, because there are ways to do it that are so simplified that you can do it standing up without a piece of paper. And that's what I want our kids to be able to do, is just do it whenever they need
Yeah.
to, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
not when you're in
Yeah.
front of a screen, or not when you have a piece of paper and pencil. Does anyone use those anymore? Uh, do any of
Yeah.
our 20 somethings use paper and pencil anymore? Or their phone? Okay, they can, do that. But I want it to be such a habit knit part of how they talk to themselves that they realize, oh, I need to do the same thing for my partner. Oh, I need to do the same thing for my work partner too.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Mm-hmm.
becomes, yeah, the foundation. I
Good.
hope
Yeah.
that will help them the most. Well, this has just been such a delightful chat with you, Cammie.
Oh, good. Are we
How,
coming to the end?
yeah, how I can't
Yes. Oh,
believe
good.
it.
Okay.
I know,
Gosh,
but
it flew by.
what I want to give you the opportunity, though, to wrap it up with any additional whatever you think that we missed. Your book is so wonderful. you know, how our children have to work hard themselves to create that life that they love, that it's not just going to fall in their lap.
Yeah. I feel like, is there anything that we didn't touch on? There was something about one of the most important soft skills.
Yes.
The one thing I feel like I wish I had worked on with Ethan. Now we're getting too specific. We need to go, but is that I wish I had taught him something about taking criticism, going back and correcting something when he's done it wrong. That was a tip I got when he was probably 20 or 21. Practice at home. And I think parents have a hard time doing that because we are trained innately to avoid a meltdown, to
Yes.
avoid pushing. I'm not going to push. I'm not going to push. If he's doing the dishwasher, if he's emptying the dishwasher, I'm not going to push for him to do it better, or he's doing it. And we really internalize that message. But the more often that we develop the habit of, oh, let's go back and do this right, that's the real work skill. Go back and redo something. And if you're doing it on a small chore early on, that then they can do that at work and figure out, like, not the end of the world. Yeah.
Such a good point.
I would say, but now let me not overdo the time. Here is the book, if anybody is just tuned in there. And then I would love if anybody has any questions or any thoughts or ideas, just to write me at my website, and I would love to be in touch with people. And I celebrate your work. I think we need more of it, and more kind of conversations and opportunities for parents to also talk with each other. So thank you. That's what I would say.
And your website is CammieMcGovern.com. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
I love the fact that it's so simple. Yeah.
It's so simple. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where I think I found you at first. I originally ran across you in a Google alert because I have an alert for young adults autism, and it came across there, and that's how I was able to connect with you. And it's just been
good.
Delightful.
Perfect.
And I'm so glad that I read so much, you know, I just read your book twice, and I'm really glad that I did, because this last point too of, you know, making sure that the kids can handle, you know, feedback and redo something is such valuable. And I'm not sure that I've included that enough in the course too. So now I've got more things to do.
Good.
It inspired me.
I'm sure you've thought of dozens of things I haven't.
Yeah, there's so much to do. Yeah.
Okay.
But I try to make it fun and short. I try to give them really short lessons so that, you know, you can spend 2 to 3 minutes, maybe up to 5. Sometimes I did get a little windy and go to 15. But, you know, I try to make it so that they're digestible and that the parent and the child can also watch them at the same time. That way the parent's learning alongside the child, and that parallel process is so informative. It's really what makes it stick.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you again, Cammie. We're gonna stop the live, but you can hang in there and we can talk some more. So let me I hope I can stop